Special votes are being cast across the country on day 2 of the special voting in the 2021 local government elections. Now let's discuss this and other political issues. We're joined now by political analyst Makhosini Mgitywa. Thank you so much, Makhosini. And of course, he's in studio. We are live here at the IEC's, what do they call it? The Nerve Center. Thank you so much for availing yourself.
Thank you very much.
All right, so let's talk about, just the culmination of these elections. I mean, political parties had very few time to really go out there and campaign, for these elections. Of course, we are at a time of a pandemic, COVID-19. Of course, they couldn't do door-to-door as much as they wanted to, perhaps. But let's talk about, have political parties actually done enough to woo voters in terms of the messaging that they've had for voters? I mean, we know with the top 3 political parties, the EFF has basically gone out to say that we are not the alternative. In fact, we are the answer, to your questions of service delivery, etc., etc. The DA says we are a party that gets things done. The ANC has come out to say that, give us another chance, we can do better. What's your observation in terms of the campaigning, as it were?
Look, let me start here, and good afternoon, and thank you for having me. What I found disappointing with this particular election is that we lost an opportunity. When you have a pandemic, that simply means that people must not come as close together as we normally do during elections. I thought that most of the political parties would look at new ways of doing things, that they would run this campaign in the manner that would push back the frontiers of technology, that would have better ways of doing things. Door-to-door campaign is not a practical way of campaigning, because you have to go to so many people, and where you arrive, you have to start introducing yourself and your message. So it's a time-consuming thing, and that is very expensive in terms of resources. Now, if you look at the South African media environment, there is no square kilometer of this country that's not touched by Santec and the SABC. And we have these multitudes of community media, community radio stations. I thought that political parties would use those to get their message across. But we are still here where we are, that people still believe in doing door-to-door and all that. And the messaging that was put out, in some instances, it left me wondering if they do research first to gauge what people are concerned about, so that they talk to those. And that could be as a result of the limited time that they had. But I think the bigger issue is that political parties, since now they have to be open about who funds them, at least for 100,000 rands and above, it just simply means that they haven't had as many people coming forward to give them money. So the system of campaigning was severely impacted by that.
And those that had the money did not come out to disclose it, which also was another issue.
It's worrying where you see a sea of either yellow, blue, or red T-shirts. And I don't know how much each T-shirt costs, but I wouldn't imagine that it's 10 rand. I think it's, maybe even 100 rand. So if you have a sea of of T-shirts of the same color, it just simply means that there's a lot of money which was put into that. But in terms of the messaging that comes out clearly, I think that they were found wanting. Another issue which I'm critical about is that the lack of debate between political parties themselves. It may be good for political parties because they get away with not answering tough questions from their own peers, from each other, but it leaves us as citizens the poorer. I'll tell you a matter that I'm interested in. If you take, for instance, a passenger rail in South Africa, you've got PRASA, which is responsible for that. PRASA has got a long distance arm, and then they've got Metro Rail, which is essentially in urban areas. You've got Metro Rail in Cape Town, Western Cape, Eastern Cape, KwaZulu-Natal, and Gauteng.
Yeah.
The DA in Western Cape says they want to take the operations of Metro Rail, take it away from PRASA, do it themselves. I don't know what the government of Eastern Cape thinks about that. I don't know what the government of KwaZulu-Natal thinks about that. I don't know what the Gauteng government thinks about that. So I'm just saying, if we had a situation where people could debate issues, we would know who has the better plan for this particular issue. And there are multitudes of other issues that they could have debated, which would have left us in a better position as citizens, that when we vote, you vote for this party or for this individual, this is what they stand for, this is how it differs to the next.
But then you have other parties that are smaller parties that are just coming out with perhaps an even clearer message. I mean, you said that most of them, their messaging is found lacking. But then what about those that have a very clear message, but they've never actually governed? So we don't know as South African citizens if they can come in and actually do what they say. Is messaging really that important, or do we actually want you to do what you're meant to do? Because we know the ruling party since '94 has had very clear, concise and compelling messaging.
Yes.
Never mind the fact that they,
yes.
South Africans voted for them because of who they represented and what their story is. But still were found lacking, a couple of years on.
Look, the problem with most of the new parties that are emerging is that they may very well have a good message, but they haven't been able to use effectively the platforms that are available. 10 years ago, mainstream media was television, radio, newspapers, and all that. Today, mainstream television is mainstream media is social media, TV, and other. Those are the things that people consume most of their news from.
Yeah.
Newspapers are in a steady decline.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure if you can still call them mainstream media. So, as a consumer of news and somebody who's interested in this, I'm on my phone, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, but I did not see these messages coming to me in as much as they do in other countries. For instance, like in the United States, Facebook and Twitter are very important in how parties get their messages across. We're not there yet in South Africa. And when I look in townships, for instance, they are rolling out fiber, which means more and more people are getting access to the internet. But I don't think that political parties have used that as much as they should. So you can have a very good message, but if it doesn't land, if it doesn't reach people, they are not able to process your message and decide whether they should vote for you or not, that message is good for nothing. Messaging is very important because that's where the political party says, this is what I'm going to do for you, and that's what you judge them on. So if they say to you, we are going to close all the potholes, you know that's what they said, and when you test them, you know whether they are closing the potholes or not. So messaging is important, but what I think is even more important going forward is that the media must follow up on those things that have been promised. If you promise something during an election, we must hold you accountable for that. Are you doing that?
I'm glad you mentioned accountability. A lot of South Africans are now almost awake to that responsibility. I think I've seen it now more than other previous elections, and they're asking themselves, what is it that I can do in wherever I am to hold these, public servants accountable?
Yes.
What else can I do outside of, just contacting them and contacting
Absolutely.
them? But I mean, another question to that is, when I hold you accountable, I mean, are you actually even equipped to do the things that we ask you to do?
Absolutely.
Or are you dependent on your party, et cetera, et cetera? So many questions. But I mean, what do you say to that in terms of South Africans who want to be active in their areas?
I think the most important thing that I would want to say in answering your question, it is that it is very important for people to appreciate that the malfeasance that is taking place in local government in the main, and it's not me saying that, is the Auditor General. It affects poor people the most. Rich people can have solar systems and all sorts of sophisticated things to get themselves off the Eskom grid. When you have problems with water, they can put boreholes, they can buy bottled water and all those things. So all these things affect, in the main, poor people. And I think it's the people who are dependent on service delivery that comes from municipalities who must be more vigilant to hold government to account. But I think the media can also play a role of supporting those communities in holding political parties accountable.
Makhosini, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Really do appreciate it. And
Thank you for
I
having me.
actually like the fact that we are now getting into the meat of content. And,
Yes.
you know, can we hold them accountable just on what they said they would do? Thank you so
Absolutely.
much
Thank you for
your
having me.
time. Political analyst Makhosini Mgitywa there.